Great, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Foxborough's Board of Selectmen, October 2nd, 2012 Selectmen's meeting. I'll go through the agenda briefly. At 7 o'clock, as always, we have citizens' input. At 7:05, a brief chairman's update. At 7:15, we have invited Charlie Masterson for a Citizens Recognition Award for all the work he's done for many years in Foxborough. At 7:25, we have the health agent and a discussion on the emergency preparedness handbook that was put together. At 7:35, we have a petition for the sale of number 216 Garrett Spillane Road by William Buckley Sr. At 7:45, we are going to be discussing the Town Hall repair finance plan. And at 8:30, we'll go into executive session for union negotiations and discussion of real estate. Mark, you want to lead us with the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, if it's okay with the board, I'd like to hold off on citizens' input and take a couple, or at least one item out of order. We've invited Charlie, and Charlie's wife Pat is here. So if it's okay with the board, if you both can come up to the table. Sure, thanks. Do you mind coming up, Pat, or am I putting you on the spot? Yep, come right up to the table, sure. Well, first of all, thank you both for coming. I think it's our pleasure to have had the opportunity to invite you, and you accept. From time to time, and probably not as often as we should, we'd like to recognize people who have stood out throughout the years in Foxborough, and certainly with the completion of the, I call it the Charlie Masterson Show, or Behind the Scenes Show, after 11 years and over 600 episodes. And I think primarily the episodes are dealing with Foxborough and Foxborough's residents and the issues and opportunities that are in this community. So you've left a trail of incredible history and a library of work that's on file with the Foxborough Cable Access. So we wanted to say thank you, and probably as important, invite Pat, because as many people know, when you volunteer your time, the other half gets left picking up the pieces and doing the real work. So I wanted to invite you to the table to say thank you for all Charlie's work as well in doing it.
We look at this as a team. There's so many things. If I'm doing things, then she's got to do other things, and then I try to help with some of the things that she does, and she comes back and says, let's see what I can do to help you over here there. Yeah. So we are a team. Yeah, and it's very, very, very appreciated. I'll open up to the board if you guys want to say a few things, and then we'll let Charlie say a couple things.
Charlie, you've done it all. You really have, and I'm so grateful for able to turn on the TV set, learn things that happen behind the scenes, and walk along with you these past 11 years. It's been wonderful. You've done a great job, and there's so many other things that you've done around town too, Charlie. I mean, including sitting at this table, and I just speak for myself and many others out there that really appreciate everything you've done and will continue to do. And it's really a huge award to be sitting up here and have all those things behind you, and you've always been one of our special jewels and gems of Foxborough, and I thank you for everything.
Thank you very much, Linda.
Thank you, Charlie.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi. And I repeat what Linda says. She says it from the heart. We all say it from the heart also. Thank you very much for everything you've been involved in for the town. Thank you.
Well, one of the biggest things I ever got, if I may just say a word or two.
I'm not going to stop you.
Was the ability to work with your husband. And back then, we were only two selectmen. because Jerry had just died, and I had just come on. And Mike said to me, he said, "Okay, Charlie," he said, "you're going to negotiate with Kraft." And I said, "I don't know diddly about any of this up here." I said, "I don't even know where the men's room is."
Mark was saying the same thing when he started.
Right.
You're in good company.
But Mike and I turned out to be a good team, too. We really did. There's a lot we did together. And one of the things was getting all that big parking lot out behind, you know. And there's some things that a few people don't know about that finally brought the thing and made a deal out of it.
These things take time, Charlie. That's what we've been trying to tell everybody. Some things just take time, and
Exactly.
that's right.
And you don't want to reveal all the secrets tonight.
Hi, Lorraine.
Hi, Charlie. How are you?
Good. I've had you on my show.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I just want to echo what Linda and Ginny said, how appreciative I am of having been able to sit with you on your show. You actually were the first time I ever sat in front of a television camera, except for when I was on the Sonny Fox show when I was about 4 years old in New York doing a tap dance, you know. But so it was great to be able to sit with you and go through that whole.
You were just running
Stage
for office
yeah.
at that time.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that was important to the show, in my mind, was to say, anyone who's now going to run for office, I'll see if they want to come on the show.
Mhm.
Because talking back and forth, people get a pretty good view of who you are and what you are.
Yeah, it was a great experience, and I'm thankful that I had that opportunity to do that with you. It was tremendous, and, you know, I appreciate that you've done that with so many candidates over the years, because, you know, it is to the benefit of the town to get to know us and know what you're in for. But thank you so much for all your work, and also thank you, Pat, for lending him to us.
Well, Charlie, I'm going to share a secret with the town that not everybody knows about, but obviously, all the candidates, their first start in this town is when you get on the Charlie Masterson show. It's always been the way it is for any candidate that's ever run for any office. And the first time in '05 when I was running, Charlie came to my house, walked right by the Beware of Dog signs, went to my front door and got bit.
You're right.
Oh,
I
boy.
get bit.
And he still came back. So, I mean, and he said, "You know what?" I said, "Geez, I'm really sorry. I really apologize." No, my fault. The dog was doing his job. And I said, "Well, really, no." But he came back. We had a nice sit down in my garage at that time, and I've actually even called Charlie for advice on issues and said, you know, how can I work through this? And he would give me some good dialogue. And it's always been an honor to be on your show. It's always been a comfortable setting. It's a true tribute to Foxborough Cable Access, and you'll surely be missed.
I'm glad.
Thank you.
I'm really glad.
So with the risk of being repetitive, I'm going to share the same sentiments. I was on your show. I probably brought about 12 kids on there for an episode, and it was a blast. The kids still talk about it, and I've also had a lot of one-on-ones with you. You've given me some guidance and some direction and little bits of your history working with different applicants, so very much appreciated. We do have a couple little things for you, if you bear with us. This is an official citation. It's from the Board of Selectmen, and it says, Charlie Masterson, we, the Foxborough Board of Selectmen, would like to extend our best wishes and congratulations to Charlie Masterson for his service and dedication to the town of Foxborough. In 2001, Charlie became one of Foxborough's most famous faces when his cable television show, Behind the Scenes, first aired on Foxborough Cable Access. Over the past 11 years, almost 600 shows were filmed, and Behind the Scenes went on to become the longest continually run series in the history of Foxborough Cable Access. An era ended when the last show aired in September of 2012. In addition to his years as the host of his own local cable television show, Charlie served as a Foxborough Selectman from May 1999 to May 2002. Charlie has also donated much of his time to the town as he served on various other boards and committees such as the Industrial Development Committee, the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, the Board of Foxborough Council on Aging and Human Services, and the Renewable Energy Advisory Committee. The Board of Selectmen and the residents of the town of Foxborough would like to offer our sincerest appreciation and thanks to Charlie Masterson for his service to the community and for a job well done. So thank you, Charlie.
Thank you very much.
I do have,
You know how-
Foxborough is still a little town and it's still a little hokey. So,
Well, hokey.
a little hokey. So we got you this.
Oh.
It's very heavy. And what this is, Ron Bresci from the Planning Board, he was gracious enough to make this for you. This is a granite. We got it in the color blue, and he cut it and polished it. The microphone is from Mike Weber at Foxborough Cable.
I know somebody by the name of
Yeah,
Mike
yeah.
Weber.
And we had a very long talk and a very good talk about your service there. We painted it gold. All the selectmen participated in putting it together. Mark really didn't do anything, but he'll probably take the credit for it. And he'll get his picture taken as well. But thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Jim,
Thank you very, very much. And the very best to you, too. Okay. You know how this thing all started? I was the head of the Board of Selectmen. I was being interviewed by the pastor of St. Mark's. A lot of you know of her. She had a program. And I said, okay. And she said, no, you can't get up. What do you mean I can't get up? I can't get out of the chair. She said, because she is going.
Yeah, just move that out a little bit.
Just move this
Well,
over.
that's live?
Yeah, oh, you're live.
Well,
I'll fool around here, John.
the thing is that her having me as somebody there, as a nobody, basically, was okay, because she was going up to the top of Maine. Her, she was the pastor of St. Mark's, but the bishop said to her, we got problems at Upper Maine. You got to get up there and straighten this out. Well, if you've ever been to the top of Maine and you try to come all the way back down here for a show, it doesn't work. And she gave up quick. And so they said, how about you? I said, not me. I've never been a talk show host before. And they said, well, we need somebody, and you're not afraid of being in front of some cameras. I said, no, that's part of my life, okay? I said, I'll do 2 shows. I've turned out 641 shows, okay? And all of those shows are meant to take everybody that comes for the show gets to look the very best they can be by having been on the show. And the other part of it is, I will not have a show unless there's going to be a group somewhere in the community that I don't know about that's going to benefit by it. And that's one thing we learn in marketing. I think most of us who are marketeers, to some extent, know it isn't what you sell in terms of a product or a service, it's what benefit you sell. And my benefit was always to try to see there's something that could be helpful to this person here, because the community is going to react to them. And we have had that. I mean, we've had people call in for 15, 20 copies of their show in a disc.
that must have been Jim.
Very well said, Charlie.
Mike would like to take a picture over there. Come over
Oh,
and take a
okay.
picture for the papers.
No, let's get the hell off the stage, Charlie.
That's very heavy, so hold it from the bottom.
Okay, I got something for you.
Check.
No. I got this. I got this for you tonight. I stopped it.
Oh, for the water issue. For the public water.
Exactly. He is going to go get you a copy
Okay.
Okay.
Of that study.
of that study.
Perfect.
And by the way, that river is within walking distance of our good friend Bob.
One quick vote.
Just hold that up a little bit so I can hold that up there.
Oh, okay.
Shot. Excellent, thank you. One more, hold on. Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you.
You wanna leave, so?
Okay, now we'll open it up to citizens update. I'm sorry.
No, citizens input.
Citizens input before chairman's update. Anyone from the audience? Sure. If you want to just introduce yourself for the record, Dick, that would be great.
While he's still here, there's a lot of civic organization work he did as well, which was very helpful for the entire community. He served as the chief officer of Rotary. He was involved when Rotary received the International Award for the calling of seniors or bedridden elderly in town that Billy Graham had worked up with the police department. But it was a Rotary program, and he was in charge at the time, and he received the International Award on that. He also served many, many years working on that chuck wagon.
Mm-hmm.
And for those that ever worked on the chuck wagon, it was a chore. It isn't as it looks today. It was a lot tougher. But anyway, thank you again.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure whether it would be appropriate to get into the repairs as part of the citizen input, or wait till 7:45 when it's on the agenda. The question, of course, is it just repair you're discussing this evening, or is it new, altered, repair, new? The agenda is very clear, and according to Coakley, you can only discuss the repair issue. Was this your intent? Can we get into the new versus the alter and addition, and get into the different options that no one wants to discuss, apparently in town hall or at town hall or even in front of the building committee?
Okay, on that topic, why don't we wait till 7:45? What we're prepared to discuss is the finance plan for the decision that we made at the last meeting to build a new town hall.
Just the repair.
But
No.
it's a new town hall.
Well, read the agenda. It
Yeah,
says
Jim,
repair issue.
he's got it. It says repair finance plan. Kevin, guidance, it says repair, not replace.
The repair, new, reconstruction, whatever, is construed broadly. The board's not constrained from having a discussion about any of the options regarding town hall.
Okay.
You know, Coakley's office has some very clear direction on the specificity of the agenda items. She gives an example about a board may have a question on the intersection of Jones and Jackson Road on the agenda, but without clarity of whether it's a sign, a stop sign, a speed sign, a traffic light, an island in the middle, a crossing situation. They could not discuss anything except just that intersection without any.
I understand the point, Dick. It's unfortunate, it does say town hall repairs finance plan.
It's fine, as long as it's clear that it's open to all three items.
On the finance plan. All right, why don't we save that till 7:45, and then we'll tackle that when we get to that point, okay? Yeah, yep. One other item that we'd like to take out of order, if it's okay with the board. Under action items, there's a gentleman here that has broad counsel, and if we can save him a little time and money to pay his counsel. You want to come up to the table and discuss that item? It's the request for a Class 2 auto license to be located at 130 Washington Street. Under action items.
This
There's nothing wrong with legal fees, Mr. DeBellis, by the way.
You're hourly also?
Depends on what end of them you're on.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening.
Evening.
My name is Paul Kennedy. My office is at 1600 Providence Highway, Walpole. I lived in town for 17 years, by the way. It's still a great town. I have with me tonight Mr. Joseph Ishak, who's the petitioner, even though his brother's name is listed here, name and Ishak. And I also have Mr. Osler, who is the present owner of the used car dealership at Washington Street on Route 1. My client and Mr. Osler entered into an agreement for the sale of the business. And we are seeking a transfer of the present license for 20 cars from his corporation to Mr. Ishak's corporation was just formed this week. We have met with the landlord. We have a tentative lease in place that we are very happy with. The accountants are working right now, divvying up the purchase price on the bill of sale, allocating so much for this and so much for that. And all of this has happened in the past 4 days, 4 working days. However, in order to give Mr. Osler some time to get rid of his present inventory, which we're not buying, speaking with his attorney, we are asking that if it is approved, that the effective date of the transfer be November 1. Correct, Mr. Osler? Mr. Ishak, we agree on that, right?
Agree.
Present, Mr. Ishak and his brother operate the Luke Oil Station right next to the Orpheum in town.
Yep.
They do have a license there for 5 cars. Joseph will be going to Washington Street. Naaman will be staying with the gas station. It's an amicable split. I don't think there's been any problems or history of any problems with the present license. They've been very good, I believe, in trying to be good neighbors to everybody in town. And I think this is a very good deal for my client, Mr. Osler. And if it is approved by the board, I think it'd be a good deal for the town as well.
Okay, very good. We'll open it up to discussion, but beforehand, Kevin, clerically speaking, is everything in order?
It is,
Your
Mr.
office?
Chairman. Just one question, if I may, to council. Is there a site plan currently approved by the board for that operation or by the planning board that could be attached to the license?
If there is, I'll get it and bring it to you. I am not aware. Mr. Osler, do you have a site plan?
It's in the planning board file from...
Okay, then the only suggestion I would make to the board, unless there's an objection, is that the site plan become part of the application and a condition thereon. So in other words, it's operated consistent with the site plan, so the applicant understands that if he anticipates making any change in the display of cars and whatnot, they have to come back to the licensing authority.
We have no problem with that.
Good.
Okay. I'd open up to the board for discussion. Anybody?
I can make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we transfer the license to Joseph Ishak.
Ishak.
This was for a Class 2 auto license to be located at 130 Washington Street, November 1st of 2012, conditioned to supply site plan to the board.
Motion made, seconded by Linda. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just that the amendment also included the site plan be a condition of operation.
I did say that to be a condition of supplying site plan to the board.
Okay. All right, motion made and seconded. No further discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? So motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much and
Thank you.
best of luck.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for coming in front of us.
Thank you.
Papers are everywhere today. 1 second.
That license is in here.
Just a couple brief items on this Chairman's update. A reminder to everybody that the DEP has filed their Class C1 response action outcome, the RAO, for Neponset Reservoir. If you're interested in that, take a look at it. It's on file at the Boyden Library, and public comment expires on October 15th. If the board recalls, I took the charge of writing a letter. It's drafted. I'll email it to you. And then if there's no comments, I'll ask Sandra to print it out, and if you can come in during the week to sign it, which is very similar to last year's.
Thank you.
To let everybody know, although it's not clearly spelled out in the agenda, sometimes under executive session, Mark and Lorraine have begun the discussions with the applicant, the craft organization, and they'll be updating us during executive session. And then once it gets to the point, we will come back to open session once the executive session sessions are done. So just to remind everybody, and to thank Mark and Lorraine for spending the time doing that. We have a special town meeting planned, hopefully sometime in December. We're looking at, I think last time we talked, it was the 11th, which is a Tuesday, and it's tentative right now. Typically, we have them on a Monday, but because of a conflict, and then pushing it off, we can't have it earlier because some of the warrant articles won't be ready, especially the sewer. If we push it later, it gets into Christmas and then New Year. So the 11th is what we're tentatively penciling in. So we look forward to working with the advisory committee. I know you guys have a lot of work in starting that process, so should be exciting. And one topic I wanted to add for the consideration of the board. Last year, we were presented around this time in November with the tax classification hearing. And at that time, the assessors group presented the selectmen with the choice: do we keep the tax split 50-50? Or do we deviate and go bring one up and one down, the residents versus the business? We acted on the recommendation of the board and split the tax rate for the first time in a very long time, if ever.
Mm-hmm.
In hindsight, it was a quick decision, but we put a caveat on it that because of circumstances with the economy and different shifts of property value and real estate value, it was going to be a minor shift. And then we were going to revisit it after a year to see what the effects are. You know, when we do something like that, a lot of the businesses don't live in town. They don't have a voice at the table. I don't think anyone expected for it to happen that quick, but I personally, when I voted for it, I was walking away from the table. I said that was a little quick. So I do want to hear back from Kevin and the assessors. That's scheduled in November for that hearing. And I don't want it to be, well, this is what we did last year and it worked, let's do it again. I want to take a second look at that. I want to hear from the businesses, I want to hear from the residents, if there was any noticeable change, and if there's any ramifications from that, I want to hear it. So if you've got opinions, send them to the board, but I'm going to ask Kevin to reach out, and when you come with a report, have that in mind. That's it for citizens, I'm sorry, Selectmen Chairman update. I'm going to go to a paperless system soon.
Don't do that to me. Don't do that to me.
Looking for the agenda.
Yeah.
All right, next on the agenda, we have the Emergency Preparedness Handbook, and that's going to be presented. I understand Pauline is not able to make it tonight?
No, she's not. I'll give the board a brief word on it. It's one of the things that excuse me, came out of the emergency planning after action report last year was the need for information for the public about how to do storm planning. And so Pauline, Health Director, and Roger Hatfield, Fire Chief and EMS Director, I think they secured a grant, I'm pretty sure, that actually produced all this. And as you can see, this is a very, very comprehensive packet of information that they put through. And this is not boilerplate. They did get a template, but nonetheless, you know, they modified the template and they put all the information in here. This will be reproduced into a book and mass distributed to the townsfolk. And it's really chock full of good information about what sort of things to do to prepare. It used to be, I think, that we sort of took this stuff for granted. And after 2 one-week power outages last year, I think everybody's learned the lesson that real deal storm planning is a necessity for people to do. So this is for home and family, and I just wanted to bring this to the board's attention. The public will be getting it very shortly, and you know, say a nice word for Chief Hatfield and Pauline, Health Director, on an excellent piece of work that they did.
Any comments on the preparedness plan?
No, I think it's great. I think it's great.
I just had to add, there was a lot of citizens that were also involved with that.
Oh, were there? Yeah.
Yeah, and we appreciate the volunteers in the town coming forward to help out with that project.
Just a quick overview, having been through, the quote emergency when we lost electricity for 2 extended periods. If there could be some type of an executive session in the front, I mean, it's very thorough. My fear is it's going to get filed someplace, and when you need it, the simple questions that came up, and I think we had like 10 meetings as a selectman, those special meetings. Where's the shelter? How are we going to communicate when, I think we all kind of got caught off guard when we had great phone numbers, but when the electricity went down, the phones went down. And we got to the point where we were going to use a megaphone and walk around the center to get information out. Coordination with the schools. Paramount was the seniors. How are we going to account for them? Is someone bringing them out? Who's responsible? So the very basic, simple stuff that we struggled with, I know is in here. They were talking about putting a one-pager that you put up. In this report, they said they're going to go, it's not prepared yet, but there's going to be a simple one-pager. Just have the basic information. This is great, but it kind of gets lost when you're in a panic.
Once you're, yeah.
James, would it be something you attach to the annual phone book, the little green book, maybe in the back with all the other emergency numbers? Something maybe you add into that?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's.
Put it in the warrant. I mean, a lot of places we could
You
put
put it
it.
in, you put it in your annual report,
Yep.
or all three.
Yeah. And people push the digital era, but most people survived, and I use the term loosely, but on the cell phones, and they'd go to the networks, the patch or the chron, if this information, if you can link into it, rather than trying to find out where it is helpful.
Sure.
And I know the town has taken some great steps, learn from the lessons, and what we have at the high school is that room that's on emergency generators is all backed up. So I'm assuming at the next go-around, the website is going to still be up. So if that could be on the website, I think people would go there.
Yeah, and I remember there was supposed to be a list compiled of people who had medical needs. There was supposed to be the fire department was supposed to have that list.
Yeah,
and it hadn't been updated for a while.
Yeah,
Has that been
the
updated?
Council on Aging has that for seniors, and the Board of Health has it for non-seniors. It's and the fire department does it, but it's really dependent on self-reporting because we have no independent way, so people have to call in and get on the list.
Right.
And then yep, we do have a list,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, I read through the handbook today, and there wasn't any mention of that. Is that something that could be inserted?
Sure.
Just to remind people, people new to town, if they come, they don't realize that there is a list that they can be put on?
Do we still have the welcome committee in town when somebody moves to town? Seriously? 'Cause
I know, that hasn't been around for a long
I
time.
got one when I moved to my last house. It was 11 years ago. We don't have that no more.
That's gone. Yeah.
Newcomers.
Well, that's still on.
That's still on, though.
But the welcome
Welcome
wagon.
one, but the newcomers organization and all the other organizations would probably, get that out too.
So can you bring that information back to Chief Hatfield and Pauline?
Sure.
Great, thank you. Next item, is William Buckley Senior here? There's an item on the agenda for petition for the sale of 216 Garrett Spillane Road. So in our packet, there's a request from Mr. Buckley, and basically there's one parcel, and he's requesting the town, which is owned by the town at 64,000 square feet, which is about 1.5 acres. So the request is, can the town put that up for sale in whole, and if not, is there potential for him to break off 6,085 square feet to attach to his property? So that's what's in our packet.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is a parcel of land that the Town Asset Review Committee is looking at, and I would say it's pretty likely that it's going to get added to the list for auction. It is a piece of tax possession land, so it's eligible for auction. We have at least two individuals who seem extremely interested in the parcel, which is good. Competition is a beautiful thing. And while I can't say for sure exactly when the auction is going to take place, we're hoping, because what we're trying to do is package up 4, 5, 6 parcels, and so we've got some others that we're finishing off some details on, and that sometime in the month of October we'll actually be conducting the auction, and this land will be sold. So I can, and I've basically I met with Bill and told him what the process is, and actually told him about the whole RFP process, which is not what we're going to follow. We're going to do the auction. But I think since then, he's made some inquiries and understands it'll go the auction route.
Good,
It's
okay.
a better return for the town.
Sounds like all good news. Any other comments on that? Now, back to we're a few minutes early, but the town hall repair finance plan. Dick, I understand your comments, and technically it says town hall repair finance plan, and I think we moved past the repair part of this, and the board committed to going towards the soft costs to design a new town hall. So what I'm going to ask you, it's unfortunate, it looks like a clerical mistake that's on the agenda. I'm hoping that the people at home and the general public, if the topic was a new town hall, they may have come, they may have not. But I'm going to ask you, is it okay with you if we talk about the town hall as it relates to the new town hall? I met with Randy today, and he's got a lot of information that is relative to the finance on how we're going to do this. If it's okay with you, I'd like to have it on record that it's okay, so we can go forward without looking over our shoulder at the Attorney General.
I just hope we don't trip on legal counsel saying we have a problem. All I'm saying is we haven't got answers from legal counsel on other issues in the past. One goes back 2 years and there's still no answer.
Yep.
But the issue at the moment is, if we're talking repair, new, renovation, alteration, I'm perfectly with you this evening. Let's do it and get through it.
Okay, I think what the topic is going to be, last meeting we voted unanimously on the town hall. At that time, there was a plan in front of us for a repair, and that was fixing the very basics, the code, the issues that affect day-to-day, so it's livable. There was a $2 million price tag on that. We looked at that. I think we recalled the past presentations that we had on new versus renovation, and we voted that we were going to support going forward to get the funds to do the final design for a new town hall. So tonight, what should have been on the agenda was town hall finance plan, and striking the word repairs. So I think the discussion is going to be town hall finance plan. And I want to limit it to how are we going to pay for the town hall that we voted for to support last week. So that's what I think the discussion. Having said that, it's going to go forward like any other warrant article, that if there's 5 or 6 warrant articles, they're all going to go through the advisory committee. They're all going to come back to the selectmen. There's time to say yay or nay through that whole process. And in the final vote at town meeting, there's going to be time to stand up and make your opposition or support. So I really want to limit the discussion tonight. We're not equipped with architects to go back and forth on the merits of square footage and price, and I don't want to bog the board down with that. Those discussions will happen, but not tonight.
May I?
Sure.
I don't wish to broach a huge argument on this whatsoever. However, there were problems on the presentation of the $2 million sheet on the repair work, which were never discussed. There were things hanging out from that presentation that were never broached whatsoever. The numbers on that attachment that was handed out had some fictitiousness to them, and I'd just like to bring up 4 of them for review or just listening this evening. One was,
Before we go in that direction, again,
all I'm saying.
Does the board want to entertain this? Because, no?
No, you said it right the first time. This is a discussion on a finance plan. This is not a discussion on a meeting that we already had where the board already voted. That is past tense. This is looking towards the future. The argument, and Dick has had many of them on this floor, in this room about having, repairs versus renovations versus moving it, blah, blah, blah. His argument now is to go on the town meeting floor. If he wants to go to the other, to the AdCom meetings and petition them, or petition anybody, and petition the people at town meeting, that's it. That's where his argument lies now. I'm not going to get into the merits of a study that we paid to have done and have it taken apart without them here to rebuttal. It's just ridiculous. So I say move on to the finance plan, and let's get moving with this, because I really don't want to do this.
May I make just one comment, please? As I looked at the presentation last week, I wasn't aware it was on last week. That was my fault. I was tied up and I couldn't get here. But it was on the repair, and a presentation was made. The oral presentation, the PowerPoint, was a good presentation. I had no question with it. It's the detail of the presentation where there are some fictitious numbers that no one ever questioned that I'm saying should have been questioned. If this is a follow-up to that meeting, it is appropriate for those items to be brought up this evening in question and answered perhaps subsequently, either at a joint session or at some other thing. The point is, what you are offering is one option only. There are other options. You won't look at the other options. The building committee won't look at the other options. They're out in the town, and believe me, they're getting spread at the present time. All I'm saying is, I think it is appropriate, as my emails to all of you stated, these other options are appropriate and meaningful, and when they save a minimum of $3 million, we should discuss them. We should not ignore them. We can't discuss them because you won't allow the discussion. Either will the building committee.
Dick, nobody is.
That's the point.
All right. I'll make one quick response, and then we'll get into the finance plan. There's a fine line between not discussing it and disagreeing on opinions. There's new codes, there's evaluations, there's professionals. That was all presented to us. I personally, I have emailed KBA Architects at the last go-around. I've spoken to Bill Caspera, the building inspector. I've looked at the square footage. I've looked at the prices. Because it's not vetted out personally on the table doesn't mean we're not willing to look at it. These proposals, and if you look at it at different times, went back to 1999 when it was at town floor.
Who's involved in that?
And it's come full circle, and it's the same issues. It's how are we going to address it? We've had KBA Architects here presenting. We've had question and answer. They've come back. We've done question and answer. Some of the details you might not agree with, but doesn't mean they haven't been vetted. And I know the building committee has looked at different options, and you're saying we're not looking to consider different options. It's been studied. It's been restudied. It's time to make a move. What we want to hear is let's get the design, and then if it has merit, it'll be voted for at town meeting. If it doesn't have merit, then we're back to square one, and then it comes up again. But at some point, common sense, you look at this building year after year after year after year after year, and nothing's getting done. So we're trying to make a step forward. The details may come out, between now and town meeting, but so be it. But we've got to move forward with the plan, and I think that's what we voted on last week. So
James, go ahead. I'm erring on caution here. I am very eagerly anticipating to hear this finance plan, but I think the merits of what Dick said earlier and what this could be bogged down in the future by being impatient about hearing the finance plan because this is misstated on the agenda could be detrimental to us moving forward and to the board, and we don't need to be bogged down by that. I caution the board. I think we should probably wait till we list this properly at the next meeting. As much as I don't want to, I think it's the way to go. I think
you're out of the country.
Kevin?
Just one point that might be helpful to the board. The reason it's titled Town Hall Repair Finance Plan, and you'll see in Randy's plan, which he'll hand out to you in a moment, hopefully, both the renovation option and the new option are both shown on here. The reason they're both on here is because the amount of money to do the renovation versus the new is close. So rather than do two different finance plans for two different options that are within $100,000 of one another, Randy's taken the more expensive of the two, which is the new, and shown you the finance plan.
Can I see
Now-
that before we?
Sure. Now, if the board were to decide, for whatever reason, that renovation was the option you wanted to go, the
Board
finance,
already voted.
the finance plan would remain the same. It would be tweaked a little bit by 100,000, but the point is, whether you call it, the two, renovation and new, are inextricably intertwined. So, if you want to be absolutely precise, we'd have to have a two-sentence thing here, which is Town Hall Repair, Renovation Plan, or New Plan. And believe me, the Attorney General is not going to get such a fine point to start saying to boards of selectmen, hey, I'm going to require you to be that precise so that I put you in a tiny little box and you can't discuss anything that's 1 nanosecond outside of that box. In point of fact, the Attorney General has given you a very clear guideline. You can talk about anything at the meeting. It doesn't have to be on your agenda, as long as you reasonably could not have foreseen that that would come up. Now, clearly, this is in that category, because there's no way I could have foreseen that someone would protest having a discussion of renovation or repairs versus new, because that's what we've been discussing for 2 years now. So, it's.
Well, it should just state finance, Town Hall Finance Plan is all it should say. It shouldn't say repairs or anything, alterations.
I can pretty well assure you that if somebody complained to the Attorney General with this board, with this title, in this presentation, the AG is not going to find you violating the open meeting law. That's just preposterous.
Dick, again, we're going to be discussing the finance plan for the new town hall. Do you have an objection with that?
As I said, if the agenda says one thing, and we agreed that it includes the new and the renovation, I'm open to discussing it. But if you're shutting the door again just to say we're going to talk new, which isn't even on the agenda, and we're not even going to discuss renovation and addition, and the price isn't the same, it's $3 million difference, in spite of what KBA put together. And we demonstrated this last year, we can demonstrate it this year.
Okay.
It's
Why don't
$3
we-
million difference.
Thank you. Why don't we do
Taxpayer
this?
has to come up with.
Randy, why don't you present the finance plan? And I did see your documentation. It is a comparison between the two. Let's vet out that, and at the end of the meeting, we'll talk about the merits of the cost of the renovation, if we go in that direction, if we decide to change our vote and go in that direction.
Sounds like a plan to me. Okay. Pass these around. Just 4 pages. I'll try to move through it quickly, but there is a little complexity to it, which I'll try to make as simple as I can, and then take your questions. So here, just on the first page, all I'm doing is just restating the slogan for the project, many services for all at your new town hall. I think when I hear the phrase town hall, I'm often confused about what anybody's referring to when they say town hall, given that there's 13 functions that actually happen out of this building. It's not a single service building like most of the buildings in town. I won't go over any of the issues that was covered a couple of weeks ago. The only 2 things I'd highlight on this first page is that 2 years ago, last month, is when this board authorized the hiring of architects and engineers and cost estimators to study the feasibility of various options with this project. And they returned those results a year and a half ago they studied 2 different options: addition, renovation, and new building option. And the new building option, which is town manager just stated, is within $100,000 of the renovation addition option for various and sundry reasons. But the new building option was the one that was recommended by the building committee last year, and then last month this board voted unanimously to move forward with the process of considering the new building option. So I've been asked to recommend a funding plan that would support that cost, which is just under $8 million. And if you turn to the second page, you'll see and I do have, there's copies on the back table there for anybody in the audience. There's three primary funding sources that I'm citing here. All three of them were on prior funding plans, but the amounts are slightly different, and there's one item that is excluded and no longer needed. First item is the capital stabilization account. It's cash that we have on hand that's in the capital stabilization account, $549,000. That's available now or at the next available town meeting to appropriate. And that would be the source of funding that I would recommend, that if there were to be an article to go forward at the special for the soft costs, as it were, the architectural work and to actually do specific plans and to do the bid spec work so the project could actually be bid out, that would be the funding source for that cash that we already have on hand. And that's not a change from any prior plan. The next item is $1 million, which is approximately the remainder that's projected for the high school project account. I believe the number is maybe 30,000, 40,000 higher than that, but I didn't want to get too precise because I know Bill over on the school side is working really hard with MSBA to get all the reimbursements that are owed to the town, and that's yeoman's work. So $1 million, I believe, is based on documentation that Bill shared with me, is a pretty solid number, and that would have to be reappropriated. Those funds can only be any remaining funds can only be reappropriated for another project that has a purpose life according to state statute of 20 years or more, because that was the purpose life for which we borrowed those funds in the first place. So this would be the traditional way to roll forward any remaining funds in a prior capital project to the next capital project, which is what we've done historically with all of the building projects. The remaining piece to get to just about $8 million is $6,425,000 in permanent financing, which would be borrowing. Now, in prior plans, I had recommended that as a primary component of the funding as well, and that had been reduced slightly with prior presentations with the inclusion of proceeds from the sale of town assets. But that is not, sale of town assets is not necessary, and I'll show you momentarily, in order to fund the debt service on $6.4 million in bonds, 20-year bond issue. The good news is, though, is that that doesn't mean that all the fine work that's been done, by Lorraine's chairing the Town Asset Review Committee, is going to be for naught, because when those assets are finally sold, as was just mentioned about one of the properties, those can be used in two ways. Those proceeds, first off, they have to go into their own special fund. It's not like they go fall into the general fund and wash in with other revenues. They have to be carved out and put in their own fund. And then there's two primary purposes that these funds can be reappropriated at a town meeting for, the sale of town asset funds. One is towards another bondable project that has a purpose life, according to the state statutes, of 5 years or more. So that's most capital projects that this town would entertain. Or the other thing that is a legal thing to do with the proceeds from the sale of town assets is to use those funds as a funding source to pay down debt service of existing debt. So many uses for those. Future building projects, defray the cost of debt service for this project down the road, or other debt service that we have. But the key point is it's not required in order to fund the debt service on this project. So those are the three components. What I wanted to show you on the next page, page 3. This is basically just an amortization schedule of the bond, $6,425,000. That's 81% of the project costs, and as you could see, The assumption would be is that if the soft costs were indeed funded at the fall town meeting, and the project was bid out, timed to coincide with the May annual town meeting, and if there were a warrant article on the May town meeting to provide the permanent financing, that $6,425,000, we would know at that point in time what the cost of the project is going to be, because the bids, would have come in, and that has to be timed within 30 days, the award of a bid, 30 days of the funding. So that would be choreographed, and the good thing about that approach is that when we got to the May town meeting, there wouldn't be speculation about exactly what is the true cost of this project. We would know because the major bids would be in. So given that, the timing of the bonding, we wouldn't go out until July. No need to go out in May or June, because if you just wait 45 days, then we'd only have half an interest payment in fiscal 14. So then it's the whole debt service spans 21 years. So if you look at the far right-hand column of this page, you'll see the total principal and interest or debt service cost by year. So in the first year, there's a stub, half-year interest payment of about, approximately $112,000. I've assumed 3.5% interest, trying to be conservative. The last bond that we just did for the library and the Oak Street water treatment plant, we got 2.91. I don't know where the market's going to be in 9 months. Doesn't look like it's going anywhere fast at this point in time, but I don't want to underestimate what this could be. But 3.5 is certainly a reasonable number, and 20 years is what we would bond this for. So $112,000 in interest in the first year, and then the biggest year of debt service, of course, would be the next year, estimated at just over $540,500, and then declining from there as the principal is amortized. You pay less interest, so in year 21, you're looking at $326,000. So the key is to find revenue sources that can fund from a peak of $540,000 down to $326,000. And my proposal on the next page, the last page of how to fund that, is all within the levy limit by not going for a debt exclusion. A debt exclusion would again raise people's taxes. Doing it within the levy limit, which has been the goal of this project all along, is to use revenue sources or expense capacity within the budget. And here I'm going to walk you through a few columns to explain how I've identified more than enough revenue that exists today and available debt service capacity, unincluded debt, that can cover this cost. So if you start over in the left-hand side of the sheet here, available recurring revenue. There are 3 columns here, and these are all sources that of recurring revenue that have been identified just within the last 6 months. The first item is state aid. When we put our budget to bed at the beginning of April of this year for fiscal 13, we went with the state aid number that was available at the time, which was the governor's budget, and then I think the House had a number that was very close to that. And then that's the last number we saw before the budget was finalized in June, and there are 5 other changes. The net of all the changes to Foxborough's share of state aid was our state aid number that we're entitled to for this year is $148,700 better than what we had planned on. That's not uncommon. That happens every year, given the cycle. The state doesn't finish their business until the end of June, early July. We have to finish our business as far as estimating what we're going to assume from them beginning of April. So that's an amount that will flow to free cash this year. And Kevin and I had a conversation with Representative Barrows this week, and the presumption here is that there's at least flat state aid going forward, and that's the words that we heard from Representative Barrows, is that the expectation, his expectation, at least what he's hearing at this early date, is that to maintain level funding, if not do better than that. And understand that the 2 big numbers in our state aid is Chapter 70 education, I don't know that anybody's expecting cuts in that. And then the other one is lottery. And we all know what's happening, there with the advent of casinos in the state of Massachusetts. I think the expectation is that there's upward pressure on state aid to municipalities, not down. But even if you don't like the presumptions on that one, you could actually throw this whole column out and it still works. I'm just trying to show you the universe of revenues that I believe are in Foxborough's future. So over 21 years, that's a $3.1 million stream of revenue. The next column is actually a good news. It's unused fiscal 13 new growth property taxes. What that is what I'll call the dividend from the town going to quarterly taxes. The primary reason the town went to quarterly taxes is to give the assessing office more time to capture new growth. As you know, the town adopted a statute many years ago that allows the town to capture growth, taxable property growth, up through June 30 of the fiscal year. But on a semi-annual tax cycle, you have to complete the whole process by September, meaning values have to be certified late July, early August, not really giving the assessors enough time to find all the growth that has actually materialized in the town that year. So what this column represents is the assessing office, under the leadership of Chief Assessor Hanna, has delivered 133,000 more in new growth taxes and values that have already been certified. They were just certified 2 weeks ago. That will be part of this year's taxes, that just that increment alone doesn't leave the levy base. It's now within the levy base, and that grows by 2.5% a year. So it's no tag on any other new growth in any other year. It's just in this year, new growth taxes that this town will collect, that it was not counting on, because it was over and above what we were counting on for new growth taxes. We were looking for 385, came in at around 518. That difference, 133,000, as it grows over the years, is a $3.7 million annuity in revenue to the community. The last item under available recurring revenue now is no surprise to the board. This is the $405,000 that the town had the ability to, had the option to not levy to the limit on, as you know, this past year, because we balanced the budget without that $405,000 in the operating budget. But what was ultimately decided and voted at town meeting was to take that $405,000 and reduce the borrowing on the library project so we could save interest on that. So we did levy to the limit, and we used the money as on a one-time basis, $405,000, to put towards the capital project. Well, that revenue is going to be here in FY14, and it's not being used to balance any operating budget. And that is also going to grow at 2.5% a year as well. So that revenue stream over the next 21 years is $11.3 million. So the total of all those three items is $18.1 million. And then the last component that I would add into available sources that are available to handle this debt service over the next 21 years is the available included debt service capacity. As you know, we have excluded debt, where people go to the polls to raise their taxes to support certain projects, building projects. We also have included debt, meaning debt service that we pay that's within the budget itself, that has to be funded with existing revenues without going for debt exclusion. So we have a few included debt bonds, which have been amortizing over the years, and over the next 12 years, there will be we will pay off all of the included debt that we currently have. Next year, in 2014, our included debt service payments because of amortization will be $35,000 less than this year, and that will escalate over the next 12 years to being $282,000 less, and then that's capacity that continues on unless filled up by something else. So, and also if we had we've been amortizing prior to this. Last year we were looking to hold back 100,000 of this capacity that had been amortized before making available for other budgets, but it was decided that we would use that to balance the budgets. We wouldn't hold anything back because the town hall project, wasn't a certainty at that point. If we had included that, that would have added another $2.1 million to this overtime. So I didn't include that, and I also did not include the fact that we just refunded or refinanced a variety of bonds, one that reduces costs on the water side, on the excluded debt side, and on the included debt side. And the savings on the included debt side for our refinancing was over $110,000 a year, starting right away. So that's another, over $2 million over the 20 years. I didn't include that. So I'm only including from this step forward, here's how much included debt service capacity, is going to free up. So that's $4.5 million over the next 21 years. So we add that to the recurring revenue that's available. That's $22.6 million. And as you'll remember from the prior page, that the debt service funding needed to support $6.425 million in bonds for this project is, with interest, is just about $8.8 million, or $13.9 million less than this recurring revenue that's been identified. And so, the beauty of this is that if you look at in the needed debt service funding, in the second line, 540,000. That's the amount that we would need to sort of reserve in the next year's budgeting cycle, even though we only need about 112,000, because you wouldn't want to go, if this plan is acceptable to the board, you would need to have that 540,000 capacity in the second year. So you wouldn't go this 736 that I've identified that's available in year one. You wouldn't commit at all. You'd need to not commit 540,000 of it. So we have that available in the second year, and then you need less of it if you look at this as the years go on, because you're amortizing. So it's a funding plan that fits within recurring revenues and debt service capacity that's freeing up over the years, and it's a very, very doable plan. Questions, comments?
Sure. Start, Mark.
So Randy, basically you're saying bond the project but pay for it out of recurring tax revenue, right?
Exactly.
Now, would that get us a lower bonding because we have the income already? It's not like we're going into debt. Does that help in the finance?
I think it's, there are many factors that factor into the credit rating, which dictates your, dictates to a large degree the rate you get, and it's also the appetite of the investors at the time. So it's a factor that's a positive. I mean, I can envision, going through another credit rating review and being able to tell this, really positive story about, how we are so well financially managed that we can afford a major building project like this with available resources that we have and within revenues without having to add additional revenues.
Would that, you think it all would all strangle improvements to, buying buses or fire trucks and all that? Would it put a strain on that?
Excellent question. If you notice in the far right-hand column of the last page, there are still hundreds of thousands of dollars of these newly identified recurring revenues that are still available for either other capital projects or whatever they may be, or operating budgets. So although in preliminary conversations with Kevin about what FY14 balancing, budget balancing looks like, I think we're highly confident, based on the pieces that we know that are going to come in, that we shouldn't struggle to balance the budget, and that there'll still be revenues that we've identified here that are also available to balance the budget and to handle capital projects.
Excellent. I want to thank you for bringing this forward, and the way you laid it out, it simplifies it, it makes it very easy to understand, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Linda? Comments?
I think it's great we have all this found money.
We don't have it yet.
Um,
Anticipated.
I guess my question is, we found this money for a town hall. We find this money for what everybody's craving for, and everybody understands that we need is sewer and things like that. So I guess your answer to Mark is there is other funding that will be available for other capital, which,
Yeah, we, first off, you can see again, in that last column, I mean, that's funding right there. In addition to that, as you know, the way we manage our revenues and expenses is that we plan to generate sufficient free cash to, A, replow into the following year's operating budget, so to live within our means, and then we use that to plow into the operating budget, and we also take a significant portion of that to plow into the capital budgets as well. So that cycle isn't broken. That cycle remains intact.
and so we know for sure that this $1 million from the high school project savings, that's gonna come directly back to enabling us to use it for,
It's,
what's that, Mark?
I don't think it's part of this
Oh.
equation, is it?
yeah, it is. Is $1 million in funding, the remaining funding in that
That was the
project.
first one.
Just to be clear on the mechanics of that, because I know there's some confusion
I thought
about,
that was like
how
clean
does,
money,
how
$3
does
sorry.
remaining funds in a,
That was out.
in a essentially completed capital, major building capital project, how do those become available for something else, like the next building project?
Right.
Those funds remain in the capital project account until they get reappropriated at a town meeting for another legal purpose. And in this case here, with those funds, the legal purpose is it has to be a project that has a bondable purpose of 20 years or greater, because that's the years of purpose that it was borrowed under, and the laws are that you cannot use those monies for anything other than a bondable purpose of an equivalent life or longer. So it doesn't flow back anywhere. The money stays in the account and it gets voted at town meeting.
But that, it's just like anything. I guess I just need an explanation of, I take out a loan for, $20,000 to redo my roof. I get Mark to come over and it's only gonna cost me $16,000. So I have that extra money, but instead of, me using it for I wanna take a trip to Bermuda, I don't have to pay that off, so wouldn't that help me in the long run? Not, to just give it right back to them and not worry about it?
Give it right back to who?
Well, the bank, obviously, it's here.
Can't do that. It's the way the bonds, it's very different than a personal loan or a commercial loan like that. The way these bonds are issued is that there's no calling of the bonds, for 10 years, and I can't see us calling. You have to call it in total, and you can only do it one time. And given the rate that we borrowed at, I can't see us, calling this. We've actually already analyzed that when we did the last refunding. So it's not like you can take the money and take the money from that you borrowed for a project, and then when you're done, you've got some extra left over, reapply it to the debt service on that project to pay it down. It's not an allowable use. It has to be used If for. I may.
In other words, we already own this money. We've already sold it as a bond. We've already taken possession of it. The only thing we can do with this surplus money now is do another project for which a bond could also be issued for the same period of time for which the original bond was issued. All municipal bonds are issued for periods of time. So you have 5-year issues, 10-year issues, 15, 20s, and 25s and 30s.
Yeah.
So this money has to go to another capital project by law. There's no option.
With a 20-year purpose or better.
And also recall, Linda, please, I think we want to be cautious about the term found money because
Well,
the vast-
surplus, we get thrown that around too, so,
Well,
when
recall
you-
that last winter, the vast majority of this funding plan is the $400,000 in tax levy. Last winter, we identified that as funding that was available, which the board had choices
what you wanted to do with it. And what you and the AdCom decided to do
Pay down.
was to levy the taxes, reduce the library bond, therefore giving the taxpayers a break on
Right.
that cost.
Exactly.
So we did that. Well, now, the very next year, that money comes surplus again, and it's available to be expended. So here it is again.
So why wouldn't we do that again?
sorry?
Why wouldn't we do that again?
Well, we've already borrowed the money for the
You
project.
can't do it a second
Can't-
time.
we can't borrow again.
You can only write down the bond once. You can't, because once you sell the bond with money that you had surplus the year you sold it, now the bond is 400,000 less than it was gonna be. If it was gonna be 6 million, now it's gonna be 5,600,000, 400,000 less. Then you issue the bond, the next year, that 400,000 becomes available again, because this is permanent tax levy money, and it's now available to spend on something. So that's, and this money, as I indicated to you last year, is very much the result of both long and short-term, very solid financial planning by this board, by Randy, by the AdCom, by my predecessor, to produce the opportunities that resulted in a budget that is balanced, providing good pay to our employees, meeting the needs of our taxpayers, and we still have the surplus which we can use for something else. So this is not.
Right, it could be for
an
something
accident.
else.
This is
That's
a.
what I'm saying.
Could be
Right.
for anything.
Yeah.
This is a decided effort to, produce very good, and I think you should be happy, because this is a situation that, as we found out, there are 30 towns out of 351 that are in this situation.
And I just, yeah.
Can I piggyback on just one thing what Linda said, Randy, because tweaked my, what if this board, and it was brought up tonight, changes the tax rate back to where it was? Is that,
Has no impact on revenue. All it does is shift the burden of tax. There's no impact on how much revenue is raised.
okay. This clarification, because you had said that to me before, and I just wanted to make sure I heard
Just
it.
changes how much everybody pays,
Okay,
not
thank you.
not what's collected.
Linda, anything else? Ginny?
Piggybacking on what Linda's saying, so the high school project savings, is that the money has not been spent on the renovations on the high school?
Yes.
What about the story that was in the Sun Chronicle, that the high school would like to expand their athletic facilities, and from, I thought I read, they were going to use the money from the high school project for that?
Again, there are many different options for any of this funding, and, that's certainly an option with some very tight restrictions on it.
But if they decide to use the money for the athletic, if they decide to use it all for the athletic, then we don't have that money.
Well,
For the, and,
Want me
and
to answer
all-
that? Might be a little more comfortable.
Do you want me to,
Yeah. Well, I was at the meeting last night, the school
Okay.
committee, and I, obviously, the turf project I've had a passion for a number of years. So I made the presentation of a turf field, and they asked me to redesign it several times now, and now it's in a location. And I think if they had their vote, or their druthers last night, they would have voted to use that money and just slide it over and forget the warrant article process or going back to the voters, because it is under their jurisdiction to do that. And it could have been done last night, and the turf, shovels would have been in the ground tomorrow. The process that, and I recall it when I was on the AdCom, is when there's a capital project that's voted on and there's a surplus, it goes back to the town, and the town uses it for another bond-like project. And in this case, it's a 20-year project. So the school was heating, ventilation, roof, bonded through the state for a 20-year process. You cannot use that money for a turf field unless it's a renovation. It gets a little complicated. Could they have used it last night? I think a few of them wanted to, and then when we talked through it, and then having discussions with the AdCom, it's more appropriate for that money to come back to town and then reappropriate for an in-kind meeting. I would like the turf project to go through. The school committee had voted to sponsor a separate warrant article, and where's that money coming from?
Want me to speak to that?
yeah, it's not the forum for it, but I don't know the answer to
Well,
that.
we're kind of
so.
getting.
But I'm answering Ginny's, in context of Ginny's question, which is, what about that project, which is an important project, which I think has a lot of support. Again, I would direct you to the far right-hand column on the last page, and certainly there is ample bonding capacity for certainly a project of that, which is a relatively small scale, or any other capital project need to handle that. So it's sort of half a dozen of one, 6 of the other, but this is probably this process here is probably going to satisfy process interests best.
But I mean, also, you talk about the assets from the sale of the assets.
I'm not counting on those.
I know, but that was also talked about as far as putting sewer, hooking up to Mansfield with the sewer.
Not these assets. We had never discussed those in
Not
that
the real
context.
estate.
These are property.
No, not the real estate assets.
Yeah, oh, yeah, those are the different assets on.
Yeah.
Because my question is, yeah.
Different ones.
Those real estate assets are not in this formula. They did appear in prior ones, and you might be referencing that.
Okay.
But there's a statute on those which also limits the purpose for which we can expend them to basically capital-type projects as well.
Yeah.
So when we sell those assets, and, the nice thing about the way Randy's constructed this is, let's say we sell those assets and we realize $750,000, and we now have that. We could easily take that $750,000, use that to reduce the borrowing that would otherwise be necessary, in which case the debt service needed column goes down by, so $750,000 goes by $150,000 a year or more. So the final column, recurring revenue not needed, goes up and provides more spending available for other capital projects.
Or you could use it directly.
Yeah, so the assets that you plan, if we decide to sell them, will be applied to town hall.
No, that would be that would have to go through process. It would be, whatever is the priority.
That would be the available money.
But it could be,
Exactly,
yes.
for
Yeah,
many things.
I'm not saying it would be,
Five-year
it
capital
would be
project.
part of the financing.
What we didn't want to do.
Available funds for projects, yes, or
What
debt
we
service
didn't
paid
want
on.
to do with this finance plan was use money that we've not yet realized, because prior finance plans did that and were criticized on the basis that, well, how do you know you're going to sell those assets for that? So what we decided was we weren't going to include those. But if that comes to pass, and I'm very optimistic it will this month, very optimistic there'll be a substantial amount of money realized from it, if we decide, because that will occur prior to the town meeting presumably, if all goes as planned, and we decide to use those monies for this and reduce the bond, we can do it. And if we decide we don't want to, then the debt capacity is there easily to do it, and then you can take those sale of real estate assets and you can fund some other capital project when we do our capital cycle this winter. So, one or the other.
Well, you just have to be careful when you're selling a project, when you're saying, to the people, okay, we're going to use the assets from the sale of, the money from the sale of assets we're going to put to a town hall.
We're not saying that.
Well, you are kind of.
No, I'm saying that's not, the plan does not
You're using
require
it for the
that.
bonding as far as.
It's not required in any way, shape, or form. It would be at the pleasure of the board, what they would want to recommend, and ultimately up to town meeting.
Here's what will
they would
happen,
support.
Ginny. If we have that auction, all goes well, and we produce X number of hundreds of thousands of dollars, we'll come back to the board and say, good news, we sold these pieces of real estate, we put them back on the tax roll, they're now going to generate tax revenue, we've realized a financial gain. What would you like to do with that? Would you like to write down the cost of this project, reduce it? Would you like to keep that for future projects? Would you like to keep it and use it for the capital program this winter? It'll be your choice.
Okay. And also, the money, this money, is that strictly for the new building?
Yes.
Okay, so it doesn't include the cost of moving the staff?
Yeah,
Well,
it's
and-
all.
And furnishings, it's all? is that-
Yeah, it does include the furnishings, and it does include, any relocation with the various pieces that we have. It's
And
all in
one-
cost.
One cautionary note, as we said to you last week, the architect said, these are the prices the last time we had the formal cost estimate done, so we have to update that.
Was it
And
like
that could-
18 months ago?
Right, and that can push these up. They may stay the same. I don't think they'll go down. Mark, you probably know better than anybody here. But
Hurry.
construction cost index has not moved a lot in 2 years, so we don't know, but we're in the process of doing that. So this is based on those numbers. But again, if it moves up a little bit, there's a substantial amount of additional bond debt service capacity to cover if there's a price increase. And we
Plus,
don't know that
the
yet.
interest rate that I've assumed is conservative, so I think there's
We
enough
just developed this
conservatism
on the
built into the
basis of
plan
the
to
s- the
accommodate
sol-
any flexibility.
This is done on the basis of the solid information we have right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lorraine?
So when you add all these numbers up, then the 18 million from the first three columns plus that 4.5, and then even if you put in the 2 that you didn't include from the reissue,
Right,
the refinance of the bonds.
yeah, our debt service
So we're
costs are low.
we have capacity for approximately $24 million in borrowing.
Over
Right.
20 years.
Over
Yeah,
20
over
years.
20 over 21 years, not
Right,
today.
not today.
Yeah, over 21 years.
Right,
Over
not
20 years.
now.
Right.
So then add to that those assets. We had a number on them in the 6 figures, so, or more than 6.
7 figures,
7
yeah.
figures,
Low
sorry.
7 figures, yeah.
Low 7s, so that bumps it up to 25. So it seems like we're just tracking a little bit higher than we have in the past with our included debt service budget? Is that what this translates into? How much more than our historical included debt service?
We're at
We'd be
lows.
tracking.
We're at, because we've been amortizing included debt. The only things that we've been borrowing for in recent history is major buildings, which is, up until the last 5 months, we can't afford the debt service on the major buildings. Matter of fact, we couldn't afford it on any of the buildings that we did, even with the recurring revenue piece has just been identified. So we're at a low ebb in our included debt, and it's appropriate to try to do more within the resources that you have.
Right.
And my personal opinion would be a coup to do a major building, without
Included.
doing a debt exclusion.
Okay.
All set?
That was it, yeah, thank you. Great,
Thank you.
great plan, thank you.
When I first saw this, I kind of had the same reaction that Linda had, is all of a sudden we're finding this money. But I did spend some time on this, and the safeguards, if you want to call it, that's built in, you are using a lower percentage rate. And if we're getting 2.9 and you're estimating 3.5 over 20 years on this amount, that adds up. But if you look at if these are solid projections backed up by what's published at the state or estimated for the state aid, the change in the new tax grade or the tax levy of going quarterly to biannually, things like this, it only comes out to 1% or 1.5% of a $59 million budget. But the way that you captured it and brought it out over 20 years to add it together, I was surprised that such a small amount goes a long way. Looking back when this came before us, I think 18 months ago or a year ago, I think that the discussion at the board was, although nobody likes to spend a ton of money, and there's discussions to go back and forth of how this happened to get to the building to this point on a 50-year-old building,
Right.
that it's got to be knocked down. But the fact is, it's something's got to get done. I think that the downfall last time was you came to us and said, well, we're going to sell the fire station and we're going to sell this other property, and the conservation had issues with it, and we kind of looked at you and said, really? This is, a lot of speculation. And if we had relied on the sale of the fire station, we would have voted on something, well, twiddling our thumbs right now. So this seems, without the sale of any, and that's where I think some of the confusion is. There's no sale of property whatsoever in this. It's basically cobbling together the different areas and seeing it for the first time on a spreadsheet over 20 years. It's pretty telling. So out of the 22 million, over the 20 years, if the town hall is between 8 and 9 million, and that, I think, still has to work through a process. Not to put Bill Caspera on the spot, but I did talk to him about, the site plan, the building, are there economies to save once it goes through and design, relocating, keeping the people here.
Right.
Building up. It's not a done deal. The money, the soft costs that we're gonna spend are gonna take a second look at the square footage, and the needs and all that, and it might come down, and the prices might go up, but that's still a little floating. But I'm comfortable that, for the first time that I've seen, we didn't just say we're gonna sell property, we're gonna raise a bond and figure it out later. And I know there's a lot of work that went into this, but it's pretty informative. I appreciate that.
Great, thank you.
James?
Oh, I thought you spoke already at the beginning.
I did. I just wanted to say to the board, I don't think there's ever been a year I've seen any board not discuss a capital improvement project of a school, a fire station, now town hall, library. Every year, it's on the table. And this one's been on the table now for going on its third year. So, and then after this, we have to deal with the borough.
Right.
And then the Taylor. And it's always gonna be one. So as long as somebody's sitting here, we're gonna be dealing with this. And it's just, this is creative. I'm enthusiastic. I really am. I'm psyched. So I think, next year will be another challenge for another building. When this is done, this is our fourth building, Randy. Possibly.
Right, which I believe they were done in a similar compressed time frame 40 years ago as well.
So it's always going to be a building, so I just wanted to stress that to the board. Thank you.
Anyone else? Linda?
I just, it's kind of off track or going back a little bit here, but, Kevin, talking about, 216 Garrett's Lane, and it's gonna go up for auction, and we should know something in a couple weeks of, how much and that whole thing, and then, you just explained how we'll have the auction, we'll come back to you and say, hey, we got some good news, we got this much for these parcels or whatever. I just, how do we get a list of what's going up when? Because you also mentioned that, along with Garrett's Lane, there's something else going up, I'm just curious, what's going up for sale and when, and who decides that? There's just...
I think that list came in front of us. I think the Capital Asset Review Committee is working on a list that we gave them.
Right, and I'm just saying, how do
It
we
has to be
know?
publicized.
Yes, it has to be.
legally publicized, and the board...
Heavy
will be
marketing.
informed.
Here's what I'd like to do, if it's all right. I'd like to not mention it publicly right now, for some reasons that'll be obvious. I'm happy to tell you after the meeting. But because there's some things that are happening to make sure those properties are in fact titles clear and they're ready to be sold. When they are in fact ready, and we think that'll be within a couple of weeks, they have to be advertised. The availability of those properties has to be advertised in a local paper, notice of the public, these are going to be auctioned. You have already voted in long times past to declare them surplus and available for sale, or their tax title possessions. And tax title possessions, by law, the presumption is that they will be resold and put back on the tax rolls. These have been off the tax rolls a long time, and the reality is, off the tax rolls, we get no taxes, but we provide services, so it's not a good idea. We want to get these sold and houses built and productive as fast as we can. But it's been a lengthy exercise getting through it all, and Lorraine's committee's done a heck of a good job, and we just met last week. And the list is that big. We only got that many we can sell right now.
Yeah, I guess, just, Chairman, just maybe we need an update from Lorraine's committee at some point.
Actually, that's a good point, because when I got this in the packet from Bill Buckley Sr., I don't feel qualified to say, yay or nay on it. It's a snapshot of a plot plan. I don't know if taking it screws up an open space plan or breaking off access to something else that we own. So I did call over to Kevin Weinfeld and basically said, if, we'll take it under advisement and then kick it back to the conservation, the planning board to do that. That particular parcel that's in front of us, was that on the list already?
Yes, it was. As a matter of fact, you've already voted the custodian to auction it.
Piece that
It's a tax possession?
Yep.
I can tell you, if it'll allay your fear and maybe some folks, in public, the fire station is not on the list right now, because that's still the subject of study by the planning board, part of the master plan, and the property directly behind it, the old funeral home.
Right.
Those are not on the list for sale right now, because we're really looking at what does the planning board want to give us for guidance for what the future should be. And those properties may end up being more appropriately sold in a more exhaustive process, an RFP kind of a thing, as opposed to an auction. Don't know yet, but it's probably a year away from knowing what'll happen. So those aren't on the list.
Maybe we can get an updated list at the next, put it in a packet
Happy
for
to,
the next
as
meeting.
soon as we get those details done and
Yep.
we're ready to go public.
And I think also in that discussion, and I think it held, we had it last time, but just because a parcel is off the tax roll isn't, there's not a necessity to sell it, because there is a value to open space and keeping it undeveloped, which may offset any value you'd get from the taxes. So I think that was part of the discussion
Yeah,
as well.
these properties have already been through that process, I'm told, and an examiner of the record does indicate that boards have opined that these are appropriate for sale.
Okay.
And as I say, the board has voted these as well, I'm told.
Okay. Before we move off the broad topic, Dick had a point. It was on town hall repair finance. I asked Dick if he wanted to stay around. He left? Okay.
Right away.
All
Action.
right, any more discussion on the town hall? So we're not going to take a vote on this? We're
No,
gonna
it's
move
just
forward?
informational.
No, the,
Yeah. I do see, George, you have a comment from the audience? Sure, if you could just introduce yourself for the record.
George Leonard, 3 Aldrich Road. Point of clarification, the 415,125 is a 2.5% increase over last year's levy. Since you're using the whole 415,000 in the schedule, it's assuming that we're going to have level spending for the next 20 years, when it is possible that the whole $415,000 could get can be consumed in the next year's budget, which would allow us with $208,000 in the first year, and then negative figures going from there down.
Actually, that's, there's additional revenue growth beyond, these revenue growths that occurred in this year.
They're not even on the schedule at all.
No, I only identified existing recurring
Exactly.
revenue that we've already realized and will recur over
My
time.
only point I'd like to make, it has not been mentioned. If we do not, if we vote for a level spending budget for this coming fiscal year, this is very good. If we do not, and we allow the budgets to continue to climb, every dollar that we're climbing in our budgets is consuming that column.
Can I address that?
Sure. Thank you, George.
These are revenues that exist today that were not needed to balance the operating budget. And looking ahead, to next year, and we'll be talking more about that at the end of the month, I firmly believe that we will be able to balance next year's budget with naturally recurring growth in other revenue sources beyond these, as well as initiatives that are underway on expense containment. So just much like we've done, over the last couple of years. So it's a very important point that George raises, is, we compromising being able to balance budgets. And I don't believe we are understanding all of the other revenue components and expense components that we're managing.
Yeah, and that, George, that is a good point. In years, looking back, that discussion, level service versus level spending, we've had joint meetings with the advisory committee. We'll probably do it again, but that's a valid question, and I've advocated one way or the other as well. So, not to put you on the spots, but since we've got nothing else to do tonight, you want to share with us some of the revenue, not projections, but savings? I know you guys have been working on different things. You don't have to go into detail, but what can we expect? This covers certain things. It doesn't include land, but things like insurance or solar panels, kind of big picture stuff. I think that'd be helpful.
we've got a couple initiatives going on. One I think the board's aware of, the other one maybe a little bit less so, but I think in general. I believe it's next week, I'm sorry, in 2 weeks at the board meeting, you'll be asked to vote on a further change to our employee health insurance plan. Bargaining units will be notified. The projected savings from that is multi-hundreds of thousands, as has been reported to you already. We just opened the requests for qualifications on our solar panel project and received some very good news. We had some very, very spirited competition with those. I'll be selecting a company probably either later this week or week after next. We'll begin negotiations with them, but we are quite confident that, again, there will be new revenue produced by the solar panel project at the landfill in the range of $100,000 to $200,000. That's not factored into any of these figures yet. There's also an opportunity to potentially install some additional solar panel farms elsewhere in town that we're looking at. As part of their due diligence, these companies looked at other places in town with this town-owned land to determine if there were other opportunities, and they've identified another parcel that's actually bigger than the landfill, where they could put another solar panel farm that's almost twice as big. So were that to happen, and that would require rezoning and a lot of agreement by a lot of folks, then that's another few $100,000 that is not currently in our finance plan. So there's a lot of good news, and then there's a number of other smaller initiatives that we're working on right now that are in the tens of thousands range, but cumulatively could produce another few $100,000. So there's a lot of activity going on, to say the least. There is a finite limit, given the size of my management staff, to how many of these ideas we can pursue at any given moment. So we're pretty chock full right now. But I think the result is you're going to see another very substantial amount of savings produced in this year's budget / new revenue created, which is going to have a very beneficial effect on balancing the budget that we'll be starting work on in just a couple of weeks.
Good. All right, Randy, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Randy.
So that concludes our open session.
No action items?
Oh, I forgot action items. I'm off tonight.
Move that we approve the minutes from September 4th.
Second? Lorraine's digging, though. She might have.
I had no comments. Motion to approve, seconded?
Yep.
By Mark. Any further comments on September 4th? All those in favor of the motion to approve September 4th?
Aye.
5-0.
The only thing I had on the 18th, Diana, was on page 2. It says Miss Brew inquired about the building. It was actually me. And then on the top, it should be Masterson, not Masterson.
I call him Masterson sometimes.
You call him Masterson? Well,
It's
he's the
tough.
master, but
Try looking up in the phone book the first time you don't know how to spell it. It took me forever. Sorry, Charlie.
Okay, any other comments on those meeting minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes of September 18th as amended.
Second.
Right, any more comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. We have several requests to accept donations to the Animal Control Gift Fund. And let's, if you don't mind, we'll do these collectively. There was $200 from Felines of Foxborough, $120 from Cynthia and Matthew Arpin, $120 from Tamsin Kolka, $120 from Philip and Tracy Costa, and it's not in our packet, a copy of the check, but there's an additional $100 from Regina Dramani. It's listed. A motion to accept all of those?
So moved.
Motion
With
moved.
gratitude.
With gratitude, seconded
Second.
by Lorraine. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you very much. A request to hold the Tootsie Roll Boot Drive around the Common on October 7th to collect donations for handicapped children. And this is sponsored or requested by Arthur Butler of the Knights of Columbus.
Annual event, so moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? With gratitude. All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Deed acceptance for High Lawn Farms open space parcel
No action, right?
Move no action.
Well, no, we're asked to sign for it.
Yeah, but if we get an,
It's.
I
there's
did, you're
some-
right, I'm
There's
sorry.
some things,
You're right, I forgot about that email.
so we're gonna hold off
Yeah.
on that,
Yeah.
right?
Good. Thank you for reminding me. And that's the parcel off of North Street. Request to begin alcohol service at 11 a.m. on Patriots home game Sundays, and that's from Joyce Carlson at the Ancient Mariner.
So moved
Don't you want to
as home games,
at
at
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
Good call. That's usually my line.
That's, yeah. I
It's
was waiting
typical
that.
for everybody.
Yeah.
Only
Same
doing that.
as everyone.
Yeah, I'll make it a proper motion, Linda, thank you. Grant the Ancient Mariner request to begin serving alcohol at 11 a.m. on Patriots home games starting at 1 o'clock.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion?
They're gonna have food and everything, so that's fine by me.
You want the Patriots games that start at 1 o'clock.
Yeah,
That's
that's
done.
Saturday.
Start at 1 o'clock.
Exactly.
Yeah, I should know
So
that by
basically, a
heart.
4 o'clock game is
Right.
not warranted to open early. All right, motion was made and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0.
And we took care of the other one.
And the last one was taken care of at the beginning.
Motion to go into executive session to discuss contract negotiations and real property, to come back solely to
Adjourn.
adjourn.
Motion made, seconded.
Second,
Okay, roll call. Linda?
yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Lorraine?
Yes.
And Mark?
Yes.
And Chairman says yes, so 5-0. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, sir.